All right, Thrive Nation, I've been waiting for this very fun doctor to have on the show. When I think of Dr. Molly, I think of someone who thinks about health in the most fun, exciting way. I think of the song, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And she's just so real. She's so authentic. She's got the most funky Instagram page you can find. She's a medical doctor. She's written a brilliant book called The Spark Factor. And I've been waiting for this interview for a while because I really believe it speaks into women's health. 148 podcasts. We've got a few women's health podcasts, but this is going to be first listened to by men, I think, because they need to understand women more than ever before. So welcome to the show, Dr. Molly Maloof.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah, well, it's such an honor to have you. I do want you to think of two stories about women and burnout. I've been in practice 24 years, Dr. Molly, and I've just had this symptom of burnout more and more. I started with a lot of regenerative medicine, and pain was my number one complaint. But I've seen like 5 patients today already, women that are burnt out, they've got an energy crisis, they're tired. And I think you've got a very unique way of treating these patients. The book's incredible, but possibly 2 stories that the audience can grab hold of with regards to burnout and women, because I think they really, really are tired and exhausted out there. So start with 2 stories, and then I'm going to get into your own backstory and the book.
Sure. So first, what I will say is that I didn't write a book on burnout. So I want to make that clear that this is not a burnout book. And my friend Robin Berzin did write a book on burnout. But this is a book on overarching understanding of health and energy capacity. So I have a couple of really good blog posts that will link in the show notes that are how I address HPA axis dysfunction. But one of the things that I want to frame for the concept of burnout for women listening is that there's an overarching problem of people feeling disconnected from their sense of purpose in life. And there's 2 ways that this can manifest. First is if you have a job and by the way, like when I say I have a job, like I mean like you have a job where you have employment and you're on payroll or you're self-employed. If you have a job that like you get paid for, which by the way, moms out there, they should be getting paid because they have like 4 jobs because it's really hard work to be a mom. Yeah. But I think even mothers and working women both suffer from problems with sense of purpose and mission and overwhelm and feeling like they don't have enough time and capacity to meet their demands. That is pretty darn consistent with a lot of women I talk to. At the same time, there's this deep pressure in society to look and to look like a certain way, to have a certain body type, to have a certain level of fitness. And so women are often overworking out, and not getting enough recovery and not having enough time for themselves and and there's a lot of self-sacrifice in a lot of women's behavior where they'll put everyone else ahead of themselves. And as a result, they burn out because their capacity is not met by the amount of demands that they have. Yeah. And that's really when the body starts to get overwhelmed. Okay. So you have to think about, like, everyone's always trying to like fix burnout on a molecular level. First, you have to look at the big picture. You have to zoom out and see what's the real problem here. Like, doctors are highly burned out. Why? Because the system makes them subcontractors of insurance companies, forces them to do enormous amounts of paperwork that they shouldn't have to do, disconnects them from their patients, and creates a massive void of purpose because you're basically a cog in a system. Like, that's not why most doctors went into medicine. Similarly, women today are expected to not only be mothers, but working women, to have a salary, to also do the majority of the household chores, and to keep the family together emotionally when shit hits the fan in society. That's a lot of jobs for a woman to do. And I would say that, like, what we need to figure out is how to create a much more connected society, a society that's so connected that roles and responsibilities are more distributed within and between groups. Right now, there's so much disconnection, and that's playing a major role in burnout, because the antidote to burnout is recovery and connection. And it literally is being able to, like, lower your demands. Okay. But how are you supposed to lower your demands and actually get rest and recovery if they keep piling up over and over and over again, right? Like no supplement is going to fix the reality of a person's life that doesn't match the real, you have to realize there's only so much bandwidth a person has to accomplish life and to do things. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do to support burnout, of course. Like I recommend certain supplements for when you like, first of all, I recommend certain lab tests to identify if you are on the path to becoming burned out.
Sure.
My cortisol levels were really high last year and I had to course correct and I had to start adding a lot more recovery. I had to cut back on my exercise. I did get a little bit more out of shape, but I also was able to avoid burning out, which was a big deal.
And I think that's important. I want to stop you there, Dr. Molly, because I think that's a personal story. But let's take the frame that you've taken in, is that there's too many roles and responsibilities for women. Obviously, we do a lot of functional medicine tests. We've been doing that for the last 13 years, from organic acid tests to genetic tests to full blood tests to, amino acid tests. So we've done the full spectrum of stool testing and GI map and all that. And that's great and it has its place. But let's take the frame of roles and responsibilities, because that's possibly going to be the long-term solution, is how do we sort of change, or how do we help our patients and clients to reframe that role and responsibility? Otherwise, they're going to be on supplements and they're going to be doing infrared sauna and they're going to be doing all these things, which is great, but it's more symptomatic relief.
Yes. So the question again is what?
The question is, with your frame of roles and responsibilities of women that are feeling this energy crisis, so they come into your office, they come into mine, and they say, listen, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I can't cope, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I'm burnt out. How do we use the frame?
One of my clients was this fitness, she's a really fit woman. She was a bodybuilder. And she came to me and she's like, I'm doing everything my coaches tell me to do, and I'm still not losing the weight. What's wrong with me? And I need to check my hormones, check my health. So I looked at her hormones and her health, and I'm like, well, you're clearly like, how much are you exercising? And she's like 7 days a week. I'm like, you cannot do that much exercise 7 days a week. You're going to damage your hormones. And her hormones were all over the place. So we cut back on her exercise. And what happened? She started losing the weight. She started getting her hormones normalized. So your hormones are a reflection of your body's ability to adapt to the demands. And your sex hormones and stress hormones are constantly in interplay with one another, determining where to direct resources. And your mitochondria are like the general contractors of the cell. So they're really determining where does this energy go and what is it going to be used for. So if your nervous system is crazy stressed, you're not going to have normal hormones. You're going to have challenges with fertility. You're going to have challenges with insulin resistance. You're going to have challenges that you're going to have to overcome by regaining homeostasis and balance. Like, how do you do that, right? You got to feed your family. You have to go to work. I mean, there's a lot of jobs that a woman has to do. But I do think that I can't speak for all the mothers out there because I'm not a mother yet, but I did grow up in a really high functioning family. And I have to say that the thing that worked really well for our family was my mom didn't make my mom didn't make me breakfast or lunch. I made my breakfast and lunch. So my mom's job was really only to handle dinner. Yeah. And all of us just made our own meals as kids. Like we made our breakfast, kids can do that. This is not rocket science. You don't have to feed 3 meals a day to your family. Like your kids can also play a role in cooking. I learned how to cook with my mom in like 5th grade. Yeah. And I got really interested in cooking when I was like a young child. I was actually really good at baking as a child, but, you can teach your kids how to cook. You can teach your kids how to help contribute around the house. We had responsibilities. We had to clean our rooms before our cleaning lady came, right? Like we're lucky to have a cleaning lady, but we were expected to play a role in cleaning and chores. And I don't know what a lot of parents are doing for their kids, but discipline was part of my existence as a child. And it was a big part of our family culture. Okay. And I think it made me part of who I am because I was instilled with these values of like hard work and discipline leads to delayed gratification and future benefits. So the only thing I wish I would have had as a child that I didn't get was learning how to meditate. But I was talking to my sister yesterday and she was like, oh yeah, they teach kids how to breathe in school. And I'm like, really? Because they didn't teach me breath work in school. Yeah. So there's a lot that you can do to help manage your child's emotions through learning and understanding attachment that are going to create a healthier dynamic within a family. to help reduce the stress load on a parent system. So I think it's really important for parents to think about how do they raise their kids and how are they soothing their children when their children are upset. If you are soothing your child with screens and food, then your child is going to grow up having problems with food and connection. And so it's kind of important that you learn how to do this also because it's good for your connection to your child. So there's some really good, really good Instagram accounts to follow that are like great parenting accounts. But I think a lot of parents' stress has come from just like they don't feel like they have enough time for anyone, even themselves or their kids. And yeah, maybe it's time that we, figure out how to make an overall shift within the policies of our society. Like we need to demand that parents have more rights and parents have more time for their families and their kids, like I think it's really different in Scandinavian countries. And I don't know, I think America's in a crisis.
Yeah. I agree with you.
The number of mass shootings is a reflection of the deep pain and suffering that people are going through. And we can change society if we decide. I mean, I'm in the position of leadership, and I'm thinking a lot about how I can get more involved with policymaking and with politics, and at some point in my career later on, probably in like the next 10 years when I'm more well established.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And it's two pillars that make you thrive, Dr. Molly, of purpose. I think we need a specific purpose. A mom can't have too many. Second is community, having your connections and your community help you. The moms have been isolated. They need to do everything. They need to be superwoman. They need to work. They need to look after the kids. And I think it's really about growing up in a community. In Africa, Nelson Mandela used to say, I am because we are. And it's this Ubuntu spirit of connection. And I think I'm speaking to a lot of my guests, and they say the world needs to be Africanized in many ways because it's about connection and community. So purpose and community, incredible. You are the CGM sort of glucose expert. I want to talk about that, but I want to go to these energy factory cells of mitochondria. And just sort of explain that in basics. So I love the tools. I love the biohacking that you do. I love your boundless energy because I think you're an example to many women that even through trauma that you've spoken about in your book, and that you were able to overcome that and be this absolute fun-filled, laughing, exciting, real, authentic woman to just be so inspiring. But let's start with mitochondria, and then let's move to some of the tools. We've spoken a lot about HRV. We've spoken about a lot of things about sleep and Oura rings, the tools that you use.
Well, gosh. So I've been optimizing health for like the last 10 years professionally, but I was really interested in health from a young age, right? So I would say that like the thing that's changed that we have now that we didn't have growing up was like we have Oura rings, and I look at this thing first thing in the morning and before I go to bed. And I look at the first thing in the morning to see how I slept, how much stress did I have, what was my heart rate variability, where's my recovery from the previous day, how was my sleep, how much deep sleep did I get, how much REM sleep did I get, how much sleep did I get, and then I'll look like how much exercise did I get the previous day, what were my step counts. Like yesterday was a really good day because I went dancing at like 2 p.m. from 4 to 7. Went to like a dance party, and it was such good music. Oh my God. It was so good. And I was with amazing people and friends, and we were having a blast, and it was just like pure joy. And I kicked myself out at 7. I was like, you got to go home because you've got to like wind down. And I knew if I had stayed out longer, I would have, because I was so energized when I got home. I was like, took me a good 2 hours to get fully relaxed. And then it took me a little bit longer to fall asleep last night than normal because I was so amped up. But I woke up today just feeling like absolutely awesome and got like 8.5 hours of sleep and did a little bit of meditation in the morning and went to the gym and made a smoothie, got some time outside, had some coffee, had some matcha. Before this podcast, I made some matcha. And I took my supplements and, just have been kind of on a roll this morning. And yeah, so I guess I forgot your question you were asking, but the statement you were making about me is pretty true. But like one of the things people don't realize is that in my 20s, I was not happy. I was disconnected. I was dissociated. I was irritable, emotionally volatile, and I didn't feel good about myself in general. And so the last 10 years have been really about transformation and empowerment. But also, I was pretty chronically fatigued when I left my residency and I was trying to get my medical license and I was working for startups. Like, I couldn't really do a lot of exercise. I had gotten a bad infection and it really knocked me on my butt. And I don't think people realize that viral infections can be really damaging to mitochondria. So I was like committing my life to health from a place of really not being super healthy. And so it was my own desire to heal myself that contributed to my desire to build a medical practice around healing of others. And really, really deeply wanting to understand what was health and how was it measured and how did you improve it? And I was very, very focused on the biology of health first and foremost. But since 2019, I had a big spiritual awakening. And by the way, when I say that, that doesn't mean that I am somehow perfect or enlightened. It means that I got kicked in the face with a you need to wake up. And spiritual awakenings are not always gentle and sweet. They're very, very, they can be really challenging emotionally, and they're designed to get you out of your regular programming and to actually show you parts of yourself you don't want to see. And it's a continuous process of, and like enlightenment is a verb that you're not just like, oh, I'm enlightened. A lot of people actually have to work at it. And you're going to make mistakes, and those mistakes are going to teach you lessons. And either you decide to become a better person through your mistakes, or you just don't take responsibility and you move on and bulldoze through life. So I'd say that like a lot of what's been really transformative for me has not just been the biological optimization, but the realization that the psychospiritual realm is really, really, really effective at transforming your health. And so there's no amount, like really almost all dis-ease is rooted in all disease is rooted in dis-ease. So like you don't feel well in your body and you don't feel good about your life, you don't feel happy about your connections and your relationships, you're going to feel crappy, and that will eventually manifest in disease. And so like when I was the most burned out and unwell and overwhelmed and sad when I was leaving my residency, I got sick with an infection. And that was really actually, it really sucked, but I was able to take that lesson and turn it into a life of health. And, 10 years later, I'm healthier than I was 10 years ago. Like I've got tons of energy. Like I probably did a little too many things last weekend. I probably should have gotten a little more recovery in. But I feel really good today. It's a beautiful Monday and I feel awesome. And it's like, once you get into that, like a few months ago, I was not in a state of flow at all. I was in a state of feeling really a lot of dissonance. And I had gone to this craniosacral woman and she was just like, yeah, I've been in flow for like the last month. It's been so good. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she's like, yeah, everything's just been in total manifestation. Everything just went really easily. And I'm like, what? And I was like, oh my God, once this book is published and I have more time on my plate, like I'm going to be able to get back into that state. And lo and behold, that's what I manifest. And now I've been in flow for like a month and it's been just so great. And I was like, things are manifesting faster. There's a lot of these synchronicities happening. There's a sense of like anything that comes into my mind that I want to manifest is like, okay, now bring me the people that I need to make this happen. And then people just start coming out of the woodwork. And it's just like, it's so beautiful.
Brilliant. And I think it's a story once again from pain to purpose, the wounded healer helping others. So that's fantastic. That's incredible. So I did ask the question about mitochondria just to explain what that was, number one. And then you've used tool, the Aura tool, which is sleep and stress. I think that's important, but possibly take us.
I use levels. I use wearable technology. I use blood sugar monitoring. I'm a big fan of the Lumen device for metabolic flexibility monitoring. And really what you want to do is you want to monitor your metabolism and your stress levels, because those are the biggest indicators of your body's ability to adapt to the world around you. So by adapt, I mean find resources and handle stress, which drains your resources. So the biggest drivers of energy drain are psychosocial, financial, emotional, environmental stress, and metabolic stress. And then the biggest drainers of, like, obviously metabolic stress can be from your food, infections, toxins, mold is a big one. And so, and just pollution in the environment, right? So you want to be able to monitor your body's ability to adapt to stress and assimilate substrates and resources. That's why it's good to monitor your, your HRV. And I really like the company Hanu Health as well. And then I also like, on top of HRV, I really like CGM, because your blood sugar is a really good indicator of your body's ability to handle stress and eat foods that are nourishing to your cells.
Yeah, we had Dr. Jay Wiles on the show talk about Hanu Health and HRV, which is incredible. Awesome. And I think it's really introduced a lot of Africans to HRV and how important it is. I've probably distributed more at Made to Thrive in terms of CGM to non-diabetics than probably anyone else in this country. I think it seems like a huge barrier to, giving people a CGM that are not diabetic or type 1 or type 2. What do you think I can or how can I bridge that between the physicians, part of the Integrative Medical Society in South Africa, functional medicine experts, but it seems to be a very big chasm to using CGM in sort of healthy individuals to try and help them with their nutrition or their stress or their sleep. What was the big thing that happened that allowed Americans that were not diabetic to start using CGM?
Well, the reality is that insulin resistance precedes prediabetes and diabetes. And before you even see changes on the CGM, you often see increases in insulin. So there's a bunch of things you can do to predict and prevent prediabetes and diabetes before they happen. But what you measure, you can modify. And so when I started putting on a CGM and I noticed that my blood sugar was like, I don't know, around 100 fasting and definitely going above 140 regularly postprandial, I was like, holy crap, I thought I was healthy and I'm definitely not that healthy. And so I had to figure out, through wearing these things constantly for years, how do they work? How do you measure things? What do they mean? And I designed a course called Your Healthspan Journey, specifically to help people understand how to hack their blood sugar and metabolism, because I was like, I learned so much, but it took me literally hundreds of papers and lots of personal wear to learn how to understand this stuff. Yeah. And so, if you're interested in learning more about it, absolutely, I highly recommend my course.
Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes. And do you think it was just awareness or education, Dr. Molly, that got sort of healthy people to use it? Or do you think it was the functional medicine doctors in America? Or do you think it was just social media that helped people put a CGM on even though they weren't diabetic?
Wait, what was the question?
Question is, do you think it was awareness, education, doctors that were using sort of CGM that helped patients that didn't have diabetes? Most patients, if you say you need a CGM, they're like, I'm not diabetic. My doctor says I don't need it. They don't really understand why important it is for healthspan to use a CGM.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I started using them, I was trying to figure out my own health. And then I was also just curious how it could help other people. And I realized that like every single person who put one on had some form of breakthrough. And it was like, okay, clearly this is not just for sick people. Yeah. Clearly this can help you identify problems in your diet or your lifestyle. And so why are we not using this for healthy people when clearly it can make a difference in your health? I mean, at the time, people thought I was a little nuts because they're like, these are only for sick people. What are you doing? You don't need these. Exactly. And I'm like, no, this helped me get my body back into balance. And like I don't have, like, I think I have brighter skin now than I did 10 years ago. In photos of myself, like, I feel like my skin looks brighter. And I think it's a matter of autofluorescence. And it's a matter of the energy capacity of my cells improving. And so, yeah, I don't know. I've been a believer for a long time, but now everyone's kind of caught up, and there's like tons of companies that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars that are in the space. Then all they're doing is software on top of blood sugar monitoring. It's hardware. So there's a lot coming out. But your blood sugar is a mitochondrial biomarker, because your mitochondria are your cells are either allowing blood sugar to come in and be metabolized, or blood sugar is rapidly rising in your bloodstream. And this is like, some people are going to be more efficient at metabolizing blood sugar, and some people are going to be really bad at it. And if you're really bad at it, like, you're going to need to be more careful with the refined carbs and sugar and pasta and pies and pastries you consume, because those may cause blood sugar spikes and you may not know it. So some people just do really fine with all these things. Some people don't, and you won't know until you put one on.
Yeah.
And glycemic index is really a tool for, how do I describe this? It's an analysis of like 1,000 people eating the same food. So it's really meant for population health. It's not meant for individual health. So similar to how BMI is really not the best indicator of health, it's really better to know if somebody is over fat or under fat. If somebody has if somebody has like visceral fat in the wrong place, obviously, like, you're going to be more metabolically unhealthy.
Yeah.
About 6% of people who are obese are actually, I think it's either 6% of people who are obese or 6% of the population, but it's one of those numbers, are metabolically healthy and obese, which means that they're not seeing the metabolic downsides of their weight. And usually it's because their weight is held elsewhere than their visceral fat.
Yeah.
So you really can't look at these markers on their own. Like, you can't really look at the glycemic index or BMI as like tools for the individual, because you need to actually look at your body and see where your visceral fat is, get a DEXA scan, or if you're in America, you can get a Prenuvo MRI and put a blood sugar monitor on and see if your body has overall metabolic health or not, and that's like very complex for a lot of people to think about. So, I designed a course. I have an entire lecture on metabolic flexibility. Brilliant. And it's really great. It's a really great way to understand how to use a Lumen device, because a lot of these, if you don't really understand the science behind it, you'll get a little confused as to what it means to be burning carbs or burning fats. But basically, your cells are capable of burning carbohydrates or burning fats for fuel, or proteins. Proteins can be converted into substrates that are either glucogenic or ketogenic, and which means they're either going to go down the carb metabolism pathway or the fat metabolism pathway. So basically, you've got this fuel, and then you've got this backup fuel, which is your fat cells. Yeah. So you're either burning gasoline, which is like carbs, or you're burning you're on your own battery power, which is you're burning your own fat. So being able to fuel shift is something a lot of people can't do because they're metabolically inflexible from stress or from lack of exercise or from poor diet. And as a result, they will end up, with metabolic gridlock when they eat foods that are not best designed for their bodies. And so you'll see these substrates build up in the bloodstream. So you see higher triglycerides and higher blood sugar in people who have metabolic syndrome. And they typically also have higher waist circumference and high blood pressure. Yeah. This is a condition of insulin resistance that precedes metabolic dysfunction, like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and dementia. So you don't want to end up with if you don't want to end up with those conditions, you got to check these markers before they become full-blown disease.
Fantastic. And we do want to get Lumen. I did reach out, and hopefully you can give me the inside track after the show about getting Lumen into South Africa, because there's a lot of people that I think would really benefit. We obviously do ketone measuring, got to pinprick the whole time. We want to use CGM rather, want to use Lumen rather, and we'll link to your course. I think there's a lot of education that can happen in Africa and beyond. Unfortunately, we're losing the war to chronic disease here in South Africa. 80% of adults over the age of 50 have hypertension. I think only about 12 to 15% are considered healthy on some basic metrics. But I do want to move to the menstrual cycle, Dr. Molly, how important that is in terms of training in the follicular phase and the luteal phase, how women that are listening now to say, okay, I can put a CGM, I want to monitor my sugar, I can use HRV, I can use an Oura ring. These are important tools. But tell me about my cycle and how it relates to my mitochondria and my energy.
Well, during your follicular phase, you have a lot more estrogen, which makes you more insulin sensitive, which means you can eat more carbs. And carbs are really good fuel for high intensity exercise. You really shouldn't go over 150 minutes a week of high intensity exercise, but you can do your harder lifts and your harder workouts during your follicular phase because you can refuel with carb. You can fuel with carbs and you're going to burn them well. Assuming your estrogen levels are higher. Now, if you were going through menopause or perimenopause, you might want to take a look at your estrogen levels, potentially support that with bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And then you hit your ovulation and you feel like way more, attractive. And at the same time, you have a slightly higher risk for tendon injury. So you got to be a little bit careful with how you move your body during ovulation. And then once you get into luteal phase, you end up having higher progesterone levels, and that can make you a little bit less insulin sensitive. Technically, this is what's called the high hormone phase. So you are going to feel hormonal, which means that you're going to have more moodiness, especially leading up to your period. And you really need to make sure you maintain proper hydration and salt balance during this phase, because paradoxically, that'll actually help you not get so much water retention, is making sure that you drink enough water and you get enough electrolytes during this phase. And then once you hit your period, the beginning of your period, you may not want to exercise as much because you're just going to feel like kind of tired and gross. I always typically do something anyway, because I exercise in my luteal phase as well, but I try not to do like my personal best lifts and focus more on like more moderate intensity exercise, more yoga, still weightlifting and still doing some cardio, but just not as intense. And then because you have a little bit higher cortisol in your luteal phase, so you don't need to pour a bunch of extra cortisol onto a high cortisol state. It'll just make you more irritable and cranky and make you, make you like crave carbs more. And then once you get to your, let's see here, your menstrual phase, your hormones are going to start declining. So once you get to the end of your menstrual phase, you actually have pretty low hormones. So you can actually perform pretty well in the gym near the end of your period. So I tend to start ramping up my exercise near the end of my period. And yeah, that's really how I recommend people exercise around their menstrual period.
Brilliant. And that's got to do with exercise and then also carbohydrates in terms of what you're doing. And obviously that's going to be picked up in CGM in terms of those different phases. So to be well aware of your cycle, your overall cycle plus your menstruation, which is very important. And tell us about your view on iron. There's a lot of discrepancy now in sort of the literature about ferritin storages, Morley Robbins' work on copper and iron. I've seen a lot of problems with iron in South Africa, people, especially women, not having enough ferritin levels. And then there's this whole debate about iron and the cycle and when you give iron and the form of iron. But it seems like there's
why don't you tell me? Because this is something I'm actively biohacking right now. I'd love to hear your perspectives on ferritin and what you've learned.
I've learned over the last 5 years that I used to give a lot of patients, especially females, in their sort of menstrual cycle, like iron glycinate, make sure that it doesn't affect the stools in there. But what I found was if some of them had an upper limit of 50 and 60, they started getting oxidative stress. And so if they had a lot of hormetic stress in their life and a lot of oxidative stress, it was actually damaging. And then supplementing with copper used to really help them maintain their ferritin levels without giving them iron. So, I used to keep my iron levels a lot higher and then not give blood at all. I felt much better. Now what I've started supplementing with copper and keeping my ferritin levels at between 60 and 80. And so I found that I've got less oxidative stress and my HSCRP has improved significantly. Look, I'm a long distance runner in that. And I found that if I didn't have enough iron, I really struggled. But I've started lowering my levels down on ferritin significantly and increasing sort of my dispensing of copper. That has made a big difference. And so I wanted to see your view. I mean, we see sometimes ferritin levels of under 10, and that's been a significant problem for a lot of women. But I have noticed that I'm giving a lot less iron than I used to in my practice.
Well, I definitely think that women don't really fully realize that they need proper ferritin levels for fertility. So you need at least 75. I think it's milligrams per deciliter. And men should stay below 150 for oxidative stress. Now, I do personally struggle with getting my ferritin levels up. So I will, and I have taken iron in the past. But yeah, I think it's also related to gut health and metabolism, iron metabolism through gut metabolism. So I'm in the process of really tuning up my gut right now and doing a bit of a detox and then also supplementing with iron. But I will add a little bit more copper, just remembering that like you got to make sure you have normal copper zinc status too. Because if you also have too much copper and not enough zinc, that can throw off the copper zinc balance.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's round up on your most important biohacking tools. Is it cold plunges? Is it infrared sauna? We're huge fans of infrared sauna. We import Sauna Space here and have Brian Richards on the show twice already. What are the biohacking tools? Do you believe in ULA, cooling the bed down? What's really helped with women's health and biohacks?
What are my favorite biohacks for women's health?
Yeah, what are your top biohacks, that you use for women's health? I mean, is it that's really sort of moved the needle with a lot of your patients and your clients, from the infrared sauna to the cold plunges to, the rest?
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love the infrared sauna and the cold plunge. I do see a lot of people, if you are burned out, you are not going to fix burnout with cold plunging. Okay. It's a mitohormetic stressor. So you really shouldn't be going over a couple minutes in the cold plunge if you're burned out. I don't think it's going to fix your burnout. I think it can make it worse. And I've seen people get burned out from using cold plunges for like 20 minutes. And it's a lot of men and women look at cold plunging as this competition. Like, look how long I can cold plunge for. I think that's really detrimental to people's health, and as well as breath work. Like, I'm all for Wim Hof breath work, but if you're in a burned out state, Wim Hof is not the breath work for you. It's too activating for the nervous system. So don't overdo the biohacks if you're feeling completely burned out. What you need to do is focus on recovery and focus on, I've got a really good article on how to heal from burnout on my blog, which I'll put in the chat. You can add the show notes.
Brilliant.
But definitely do not overdo these biohacks because you think it's going to fix your burnout. It's like you actually have to make sure that you get recovery in and you don't add, like, these are good for building energy capacity, but they're not good for healing burnout. Like, I think sauna is good at all times, but don't overdo it to the point where you're passing out. You have to make sure you maintain enough hydration. Somebody who's burned out can develop orthostatic hypotension. So if you do too much sauna with not enough hydration, you could end up fainting. So it's really important to recognize the role of these tools and when to use them and when not to use them. Because like burnout is not the same as optimizing health. Burnout is a condition where you're fully sick and now you need to get back to baseline, which is why I wrote these 2 blog posts, because I didn't include this in my book because I find that there's a lot of controversy around cortisol testing. So I kept it out of the book, but I'll probably add it to another book.
Okay, brilliant. And then just the last question before we wrap up, psychedelics. I know you got a very good sort of incredible story on psychedelics. We've started with psychiatrists here in Africa using psilocybin and other psychedelics has been proven to be really helpful for trauma and people that just can't shift their health or optimize their health. Give us your view. Maybe you can share your story or your view on psychedelics and the importance in women's health.
Well, I think that psychedelics are really important for healing trauma, and about 1 in 5 women are raped in America, and about 1 in 4 are abused as children. And these numbers are much higher in Africa. And so when you have trauma in your nervous system, you have resting tension that is draining energy. And it's like malware in the background that's draining CPUs. So not only is it causing like your nervous system to be out of balance, but it's contributing to just having less overall energy throughout the day because you're on a state of hypervigilance. So EMDR, somatic experiencing, trauma release exercises, psychedelic medicine can be really helpful for healing from trauma. But it really does require you to properly integrate your learnings and to also make sense of your experience and not to blame yourself or feel ashamed of anything that has happened to you, but to be able to have the courage to heal from it.
Okay. And do you think that's probably one of the big reasons why women have really struggled with their health, is the suppressed trauma that hasn't really been dealt with or sort of expressed and healed?
Yeah, I mean, I think men have trauma too, by the way. So I don't think it's just women, but I do think that there's certainly quite a lot of people out there that feel like they don't know how to address the parts of themselves that have been hurt. And those are typically what are known as the exiles of the internal family systems model. So if you don't look into the negative experiences of your life and actually try to heal from them through different paths, it's just going to haunt you and rear its head when you get triggered in your relationships.
Yeah, good. Just a last message of hope, Dr. Molly, been in practice 24 years, losing the war against chronic disease. I had Zach Bush on the podcast. 1 in 2 men will get cancer in their lifetimes. 1 in 3 women are going to get cancer in their lives. I'm just needing more debriefing and counseling as a practitioner than ever before, just because of the trauma that I'm exposed to from patients that have become friends over the last 20 years. To give a message of hope to the listeners, women and men, with regards to health and optimizing their health.
Well, we're getting better and better tools for predicting and preventing disease. We have so many people focusing on this new model of medicine that's about personalization. And right now, a lot of these tools are really expensive, but they're going to get cheaper. And with AI, way faster and way more affordable for way more people. So keep hope, but also remember that a lot of cancer is metabolic in nature. And a lot of the reasons why people are getting so much cancer is because their metabolisms have been deranged by their lifestyles. So if you want to avoid getting cancer, then you really do have to look at your diet. You have to look at your exercise. You have to take care of your mitochondria, and you have to detox from all these products in our environment that are endocrine disrupting and hormone disrupting.
Brilliant. Well, Spark Factor, incredible book. Supercharge your cells, feel better than you ever have, optimize your health, a real health hero. Where can people connect with you? Because I think you're probably the most fun-loving health practitioner, medical doctor out there with a smile on your face.
Oh, thank you. I think it's a testament to like committing my life to health and actually living it. So yeah, I'm at drmolly.co on Instagram and www.drmolly.co. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter at Molly Maloof, MD.
Okay.
And yeah.
We'll put those all in the show notes, and we declare favor and blessing over you, Dr. Molly. Thank you for your calling and your courage. I can't wait until you're in politics. More influence to help people and change people's life and transform the healthcare industry. You know, I've been to America over 20 times on conferencing and courses and regenerative medicine. Incredible place for training, incredible doctors, but something has to change in sort of the medical healthcare model, both in Africa and in America. So thank you so much for your time. And I just want to see you go from, I think this is probably the first book of many books, and so well written and well done.
Thank you.